Hey everyone, and welcome back to the second episode of the AI Canvas. I'm your host, David Foster, author of the O'Reilly book Generative Deep Learning and co-founder of Applied Data Science Partners, a consultancy specializing in the application of AI across industry. Over the coming weeks, we're going to explore the exciting world of generative AI and its impact on business and society. Welcome back to the AI Canvas podcast. I'm your host, David Foster, and today we are joined by Fabienne Morris. I'm so excited to have Fabienne on the podcast. Fabienne is an independent marketing and communications expert in the arts and culture sector, specializing in communications, branding, digital innovation, audience development, and marketing research. So I think we're going to have a fantastic conversation today because these two fields of generative AI and marketing and comms are colliding in a huge way. And so we're going to be discussing all the implications of this in the next hour or so, and particularly the opportunities, but also the threats to the industry. So Fab, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thanks
Thanks very much. Yeah, so could you just tell us maybe a little bit about yourself to begin with and how you got into the sector?
Sure. So yes, my background is that I grew up sort of all round quite good at school, but in particular was quite gifted at music, and so I ended up studying that at university. But I always knew I didn't want to be a performer, and I got quite drawn to this idea of, I can do some behind the scenes stuff. I also loved writing, that's my other passion, English, and so I sort of managed to combine those, and I went into marketing and comms in specifically for classical symphony orchestras. So did a bit of work for the BBC Proms, and then moved on to working with the London Symphony, the Royal Philharmonic, the Philharmonia, so three of the big hitters in London, doing a variety of marketing, comms, fundraising roles. And then I went on to, after about sort of 8 years of that, I went on to work for a talent management agency. So again, in the classical sector, but basically they manage the careers of famous classical musicians. So that was quite a different challenge. And then around the time of the pandemic, I was starting to feel a little bit constrained by just music, because I'm actually a bit of a magpie. I'm interested in all sorts of things. So I decided to go self-employed and broaden out. And now I consult for a whole range of arts and cultural organisations. So this past year I've been working with an amazing theatre company, I've worked with a stately home, worked with a higher education institute. Music is my sort of hardcore background, but I like to think that I know quite a lot about the cultural sector as a whole.
That's fascinating. So you've sort of seen a lot of different experiences from across the board, not just arts and culture, but more recently with other fields as well. And I guess, my instinct, because I'm wrapped up in this world of generative AI, is that this must be immediately transforming the industry. I don't know, would you agree with that, or would you say it's a slower burn?
So, no, I think, the arts and cultural sector, look, for a start, is very diverse. So you've got everything from teeny tiny organisations who are operating on a shoestring up to massive organisations like the BBC, right? So you've got all sorts, but on the whole, I would say the arts and cultural sector is not fast at adopting tech. Whether that's AI or other types of technology, it tends to be a little bit reticent, a bit intimidated. I think it's not an overtly commercial sector, talking less about the entertainment side of the business and more about the arts and culture. A lot of it's quite subsidised, and I think some of that sort of filters down into the way that we do our marketing. So if someone from, Tesco was to come see how the London Symphony do their marketing, they would be astonished, because we have fair enough, Tesco's a global mega brand, but we don't have anywhere near the same kind of resources.
Yeah, the budgets are tight.
And the budgets and that sort of thing. And that also filters down into the training. We just don't necessarily understand some of this tech. However, then there are things that we do in our sector that, actually the more sort of commercial sectors could learn a lot from as well, in terms of like relationships with audiences and things like that. So, I think, just a kind of straw poll asking some of my friends and colleagues, hey, what do you think of AI? Honestly, I've had everything from what is ChatGPT, even just this morning, from someone who works in my sector, to someone going, oh yeah, I've been playing with, Mid-Journey and creating images. And as we'll maybe get onto, I've been interested to see kind of a few examples coming out from organisations. I'd call them, though, more sort of performative, almost like stunts. People are kind of playing with AI, they're having a bit of fun with it. And what I've yet to hear about, although maybe it is happening, because of course it wouldn't hit the news headlines, is I'm yet to hear about arts and cultural organisations integrating it into their business models in a really kind of day-to-day systemic way. that's, you know, and I know that's happening very rapidly in lots of other sectors, but in my sector, there is still a lot of, it's not even necessarily on the radar yet.
Yeah, wow. And it's hard, isn't it, to remember sometimes we're talking about a technology that's like 5 months old.
Yeah.
So actually, you're right to say actually this is a very new technology, and a lot of companies and a lot of organisations are probably still quite reticent about incorporating it into something that, especially when it's so new and we don't really know what it's capable
That's
of.
That's right.
But I guess what's really interesting is, you know, even though generative AI bases itself on the fact that it can create and it's trying to do things that are inherently human, even the industry of the arts and creative arts is still, as you say, like lagging behind perhaps some of the other industries with bigger budgets and with bigger resources at their disposal. So perhaps if we could just go back to square one and just talk about traditional marketing within the sector, what would organisations like the LSO, say, the London Symphony Orchestra, be doing today to reach their audiences and get in touch with them?
Yeah, great question. I'm actually going to pick a different organisation, if I may, because they're more fresh in my mind. So I've worked with an amazing theatre company recently who are, you know, literally one of the top theatre companies in the world. They've got an incredible, passionate fan base. They've been very pivotal in changing the form of theatre in this country and in Europe. And we were launching a major new international touring production. So just to give you an example, and by the way, the staff who staff that incredible organisation, which is 40 years old, there's 5 of them?
Really?
6 of them in the office. So that's the first thing to note, it's a small team. But the kind of techniques we'd be employing would be obviously everything from the initial asset creation. So obviously you're deciding on, you know, what's the artwork going to look like and how's that going to inform the videos that we create and the social assets that we create. So we're working with designers, and then obviously once you're getting to sort of on sale, you're looking at how do we communicate with our customers. So they have a mailing list of, you know, X thousand, so communicating with them, but then also getting the word out through press, of course. That's a big avenue as well, so dealing with press agencies. So yeah, email, social, website, you know, I don't think anything particularly groundbreaking.
Yeah, it's interesting though that each of those touch points, you almost start thinking, is this somewhere where a chat GPT could enter and actually really radically change how people do things?
Yeah,
you mentioned there, so things like, you know, creating personalised emails. I mean, it's just off the top of my head something that I guess would be something that would potentially be a game changer if you could not just, I imagine at the moment there's some form of marketing differentiation between, you know, one audience and another, but actually making it hyper-personalised. Is that something you sort of think about in this sort of sphere? For
sure, and I think again you've got to recognise that when it comes to audience or customer segmentation and personalisation, again the industry on the whole, especially the smaller organisations, are quite far behind on this. So again, you know, if you were a big commercial company, you know, you'd have been doing that 20 years ago, that you'd have been able to like identify different segments. Of course, segmentation happens in our sector, especially with some of the bigger companies, but it is all quite manual, I think, still. And in terms of that hyper-personalisation, the sense that every different person could be getting a slightly different version of the monthly e-news, or could be like opening the website and see things presented in a different order. I think that to people in my sector, that would feel slightly like the stuff of science fiction a little bit. But you can see how absolutely, I mean, to give that example of, you know, with the theatre company, we were sending out this monthly e-news, which was to all of the customers, you know, who'd expressed interest in the company, and there'd be a section on, you know, the main production, and then maybe some education work we were doing, and what have you. And at the moment, what we're doing is we're sort of asking people at the moment of subscribing, tell us your preferences, which is the sort of the manual way that we're trying to work out what people want to hear about. But if there were ways that the box office data and other touch points could be sort of, you know, properly captured, analysed, so you can really create a journey, and you can say, look, I see this person started interacting with us here, and they've done X, Y, Z, and we are, you know, we predict that these are the kinds of things they're going to want to come and see, that these are the kinds of prompts they're going to respond to if they're looking for, you know, user-generated content. I mean, that starts to get incredibly sophisticated.
Well, I mean, what I've been thinking about is from the data nerd perspective, I guess, is, you know, like you rightly say, this sort of stuff's been talked about a while. The idea of personalisation isn't new, but I think what this kind of technology, like you say, brings is, it's not just about, you know, picking someone's preferences out and therefore sending them certain marketing and using data in a kind of reactive way, but it's about saying, we can capture data from all different kinds of source. So what they've seen in the past, maybe any feedback that they've given on the website, their location, their age, their demographic. And we don't now need to structure that data in a certain way to use it. We can just throw that across to something like ChatGPT and let it work out how to talk to that person.
Yes, and it can be autonomous in that sense. It can create the strategy. Yeah,
wow. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, when it comes to personalization, I think there is a really fine line between providing a good customer experience and then just being very creepy. And I think we've all experienced that, haven't we? When actually, okay, it's great that Netflix recommends exactly what I want, or that Amazon has, the next thing lined up for me. But there's occasions where, especially, and this is a comms issue, when it's worded in a way that suddenly makes you think my privacy has sort of been invaded here. I saw you did this last week. Does that mean you want to do this? And I think humans have quite a human reaction to that, which is kind of back off. It's not up to you to decide. And so I think this is a bigger ethical question in marketing, is as we can move towards getting more and more and more targeted, does that mean we should? And does that mean it's actually ethical, right? Because actually there are many times when it's not right for someone to buy something, right? And actually a big part of honest, authentic marketing is recognizing when it's not your customer, and actually you should move on and try someone else for whom actually your product or service can actually solve their problem. If you're just sort of forcing something down someone's throat, or you're twisting it to such an extent that you're almost brainwashing them into buying, I think that's a very sinister form of marketing, and that's obviously relentlessly commercial and profit driven, and I think contributing to a much bigger societal problem, which is that we are a very consumer-based society, and actually I think in a strange way we are reaching peak consumerism, and people are starting to crave, because they've realised that stuff doesn't make them happy necessarily. And so I think also you might see pushback from people saying, like, don't need more stuff, don't need more, don't advertise. That's right. And so and look, with every movement you have a counter movement, and so I'm really interested to see what happens as it gets more and more targeted. Yes, you'll definitely see some increase in sales and engagement, but I think you might also be venturing into slightly dangerous territory where people are saying, don't tell me what to think. Yeah, especially if it's an AI, not a human. That's right. Especially if it's something that's automated and it feels... It reminds me a bit of the term uncanny valley, which is something we see in AI, which is where if something is almost human, but it's not quite there, that's the weirdest thing for us. It totally freaks us out. It's actually better if it's more... Hello, I'm a robot. That's right. Absolutely. And it's like, because we don't like to feel like we're being cheated, or like something's a fake. And I think, maybe we'll talk about that in due course in terms of what happens when art is made by AI. But I think humans have a really strong sense of fairness and justice, and when something is right or wrong. And I think AI again is dancing around this kind of quite murky territory. And I think I was talking as well, just to touch on a point you mentioned earlier, to Luba Elliott on the podcast a few episodes ago, and she was saying she's an art curator, and so she, one of her big interests is putting art in front of people that challenges them and makes them think outside the box a bit. And she was saying, actually, if we use AI wrongly, what we're going to end up doing is homogenizing everything, and everything just becomes the simplest version that we think is going to appeal to as many people as possible. And so in fact, instead of hyper-personalization, we just put in front of people the thing that we think is going to be hyper-personalized to them because they've watched all of these shows and they've done this and they've done that. But actually, they want to watch something different. That's exactly right. You're again that cardinal sort of mistake of, someone's done this in the past, therefore they want to do more of that. And I already find that when I go to like Amazon and it's recommending me certain books, I'm like, I've read a lot of books on whatever, becoming a mum, but look, I don't necessarily want to read more of those. And actually the reason I go to my book club, a real in-life gathering, is precisely because a random person chooses a random book that I have no connection to. Actually I revel in that, and I enjoy that because it's expanding my horizons. And again, we've got to be really careful, it's a bit like streaming or whatever. If all of your preferences are just predestined, where is the room for discovery? Where is the room for growth? And again, you can see how potentially then it's even harder for people. They have to go out and really search for that, and otherwise you've got people who are becoming essentially quite stunted because they don't have to do their own discovery. We all want convenience, we all need that, but convenience to the point of being spoon-fed everything, I think, it is quite sort of dangerous.
Yeah, and it crosses over, I think, not just from a perspective of marketing, but in everything. So when I'm writing something now and I'm using ChatGPT, am I being less creative than I would be if I were just blank sheet of paper with that, that constraint that I've got me and my brain. It feels like two people at the sometimes, but you know what I mean? It's like, and the audiences will be the same. If they are presented something at the theatre that doesn't come from data analysis to the nth degree, and actually it's just the fact that here's what we've got on at the theatre.
That's right.
And they're going and finding what challenges them.
That's it. And there's an element of surprise and discovery and actually doing something new and maybe finding, I didn't think I'd like that, but I do. Yeah. And that's often some of the stuff that is the most rewarding, actually. We all have our TV shows that we go back to time and time, and that gives us a level of like comfort and familiarity. But actually, as humans, we psychologically, we seek both. We seek familiarity and security, but we also seek novelty. Yeah. And that's, I think, what marketers have got to remember. Okay, interesting. So from a comms perspective, I guess what we're saying is AI there's a place for it. It's obviously going to improve efficiency and workload reduction, for example, but we've got to be really careful that the communication itself doesn't come across as a bit hyper-personalized and creepy. I think so. And maybe giving the customer a choice and saying, actually, do you want to, making it quite transparent, do you want to engage with us on these different levels, and some people are very happy to, chat away to a bot, especially that they're very sophisticated nowadays. I was thinking, for example, you could have a virtual assistant that, helps someone pick a concert, because that can be very overwhelming for people who've not been to a concert before. And so rather than, you've had, again, these quite rudimentary things of, do you like, a romantic music? Do you like to relax? But to take that one step further and actually have a chat and say, tell me, the chatbot says, tell me what your worries about attending a classical concert. Tell me, do you like this? Do you like that? And have a proper back and forth. And then, hopefully that customer feels, wow, I really feel more informed. It's like having that best friend who takes you to something. Exactly. So for sure there are ways to do that, but then I guess other customers really wouldn't want to do that. It's very personal. So I think the key is to not force anyone to do anything and to be transparent about the different ways you can communicate. And again, we've seen this in when you're trying to get through to a big company and you're just faced with a voice activated whatever. How many people, yes, okay, it's more efficient for the company, but how many customers absolutely hate that? For sure, because they feel really dehumanized, actually, and they just feel like, wow, I'm literally just a number in the queue. Yeah, exactly. And it's going to be interesting, I think, the chatbot arena going forward, because you're right, there's a real dichotomy there between speed and ability to be served quickly, in which case chatbots all the way. Yeah. But actually people hate going through that formal process, and then at the end of it they end up having to talk to a human anyway. Right. Now what I guess ChatGPT offers is the ability for the conversation to be a lot more fluid, and potentially answer a question which is more niche and doesn't go down the usual decision tree of like, is this what you mean? Is this what you mean? Yeah. Okay, well, talk to a human. Yeah. So I guess, on that regard, there's risks there around making sure the conversation doesn't diverge too far from what the company's happy talking about. Sure. And I guess the same is true of general communication, even through email, that if you're generating this stuff, you've got to be sure it's in line with your branding and your messaging. Absolutely, and that's another thing that I think, as I've been becoming more and more immersed in AI, that's immediately coming up for me is, as a marketer and a comms person, we're very detail oriented. We want to see all of the output. We want to proof it. We want to check it. That's our job, is to create it, but then also make sure it's ready to kind of go out in the wild. And yes, if you're having essentially, 20 different emails that are generated, or let's talk about hyper-personalization, 20,000 emails that are, completely generated, you can't look through all of those. No. So like I said, you've got to have real faith in that system that they're not going to be saying something bizarre, off-brand, and this is where I think, some bigger companies I know are, not in my sector, are investing in sort of bespoke LLMs. They're actually wanting to create large language models that are not only, got the sophisticated sort of design, but crucially can be trained and understand their company. Yeah, for sure. And so therefore all the branding, all the values, all that stuff that is so imperative in marketing, that doesn't get diluted. Yeah, right. And I think that's, again, big companies are going to be able to do that. Small companies, no. No, they're going to be using the off-the-shelf stuff, which comes with misalignment to their branding and so on. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think it's a question that the companies, even like OpenAI, are grappling with at the highest level. That they're not really confident that these models are aligned to human values, and that they're worried of. Even the CEO, was talking on various podcasts, and he's sort of saying, well, this is the major problem that our company's facing at the moment is how do we align this to the customer's unique use case? And
And that means not just alignment in terms of ethics, but also alignment in terms of branding, or alignment in terms of language and modeling and the way in which the customer's being talked to. So certainly opportunities, but like you rightly point out, a lot of risks as well.
Yeah.
I'd like to come now to something slightly different, which is the art and the music itself.
Yeah.
Because of course, we can talk about marketing these things, but ultimately, the actual art itself is kind of something that's in play in terms of these large language models and music models are concerned. So I suppose my first question would be, have you seen anything like this start to enter the sphere, if you like, of the arts and creative cultures at the moment, or do you think it's so early that this is something we've got to look out for later down the line, but at the moment we're still very much about going to see something human generated?
It's definitely starting to happen. I think people have started to explore using AI to create art. We know that there was that famous instance of the AI image that won a competition, and then actually it was revealed, hang on, this is AI, and what do we do about this ethically? I think the guy there was saying, well, you didn't say it couldn't be, so...
What's your view out of interest? Do you think it's a cheat, or do you think it's interesting?
I don't know enough about the story actually to know whether, in a way, if he kind of did exploit a loophole, I'm almost quite sort of impressed, because it's kind of making a point.
I think he did, didn't he? I think it was something like he said, look, I was going to enter it, and if it won, I would have come out and sort of told you all that. But so I don't think he was trying to trick them, but it was interesting. It almost became an art in its own right.
That's right, and he was essentially using it as an experiment, right, to see, and that's how it is going to be for the next couple of years and onwards. Is lots of experiments. So I'm working for a music conservatoire at the moment, and they actually very recently had a concert which was basically a duo between human and AI.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So that was. Something that they did, and then they had a panel discussion afterwards. So they are sort of, that's kind of facing the issue head on.
How did that play out on stage? Was it like live? Or?
Do you know? I actually don't know. I hadn't been working. It's happened before I started working with them. But from the photo, it looked like basically, yes, it was literally a computer that was there. Nice. It almost like a traditional recital, and then the guy playing the piano.
Yeah, and like improvisation with each other.
Yeah, maybe it was filmed. Maybe we can dig it out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll put it in the description.
But I like that they also had the panel discussion straight after. I think that's kind of key, because it's great to have these explorations into this, but a really important part is to involve the audience, because the whole point is art is made for an audience. It has to have meaning for that audience, and so it's all well and good to have your little experiments and go, oh, I can create in the style of this, or I can blend that. But actually, how did the audience feel about that? Did they mind that it was essentially created by AI? Did they feel like they lost something? And I think actually involving them in that discussion is a really important part. And I think you're more likely to get people's buy-in that way. I can imagine if you saw like in a brochure that a whole symphony was next to a Beethoven symphony, then got a new overture by AI or something. Look, there'll be people who come for the novelty value for sure, especially in the next couple of years because it's so new. But yeah.
It's whether it becomes an art form in its own right, or whether it actually is so indistinguishable that we start viewing it as like we don't care whether it's generated by AI.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, I was talking about this yesterday with my husband, and we came back to the same conclusion, which is, arts and music and theatre and dance, whatever, it fulfills so many functions. It's escapism, it's relaxation, it's entertainment, it's meaning, it's all kinds of things that art can do. And I think AI would be able to tick quite a lot of those boxes quite satisfactorily. So for example, and we already, in a sense, when I'm listening to kind of random meditation music or whatever, it's probably computer generated, and it's just there, and I'm zoning out at night and it's helping me sleep. But when I was working for the artist management agency and I was looking after talented soloists, it wasn't enough for people to hear a certain person playing the piano, or at least the fans. They wanted to know, who is that person? Exactly. Who is that person, behind the music, and whether that's performer or composer. People are obsessed with the artist and with the creator, so performer and creator. And you see that in concert programs. People want to know, who was Mozart? How was he so gifted? What things in his life maybe led to him being so gifted? And I think when you remove that, let's say you have an actual machine playing or you have a machine creating, you lose such a magical part of the story, and that part is, wow, that came from a person,
and
a person, their toil, their life experience, their memories, their dreams have all been distilled into this piece of art. And or the performer for that matter, like when you look at some of these dances, I went to Sadler's Wells the other night, you just think a human shouldn't be able to do that with their body, but they can.
Exactly.
And that's part of what makes art so incredible, is that you just can't believe a human has done it.
Yeah.
And so, and then they have. Whereas if you take that away, suddenly it's like, would you be impressed by a robot playing the cello?
No, well, this is it. I mean, I just sort of feel a little bit sort of, well, what have I've spent my life, getting good at this thing, and actually I think I've enjoyed the process, and now if I'm just being replaced, and I think I would feel really, really sort of almost offended, and I think that's how a lot of artists feel, that they're threatened by this technology, because they're like,
that's right.
You haven't been through my struggle to kind of get to where I am.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think the point there that you made around, art itself is something that goes beyond the actual output. It's something you want to know the backstory. It's something that AI doesn't replace, and actually would struggle to ever replace. And that's the safe space, I think, for artists, is that they can honestly claim that the human condition is something that is unique to them.
Absolutely.
And so if we think about how this might play out in future, perhaps the performance, there will be more emphasis on the actual performance of art, and it's not about the recording or going there and holding your phone up, but you actually go there because you know that this is the one chance you're going to get to see this person, and that's something that can't be taken away from them. I wonder if you've heard of the recent case to do with Drake and
Kanye.
Exactly, and also with Grimes as well, and the different stances they've taken.
So am I right in thinking that the Drake and Kanye thing was all done without their knowledge, and then the song was released and hitting up the charts or whatever, and then was swiftly taken away. Whereas Grimes has gone the other way and has said, hey, if you want to sample me in your songs, go ahead. There's a market there, and there's a business model. I wonder what your take is on that, because that gets to the very heart of the problem. I think you've got these two opposite ends of the spectrum. Well, I think it's up to the artist. It really is. I think you can't legislate for that. I can't imagine a world in which you can, and it's fair to, because for every person who's saying, hang on a minute, that's my voice, absolutely not. There'll be others who say, sure, as long as I'm making some money from it, go ahead, create songs with my voice. And they may even think that's quite cool. They may like the possibilities that opens up. It really depends. It's a very personal thing about how they see their artistry. So I think you're going to get people on both sides.
And I think there's no real, like you say, there's no body overseeing this to say this is right and this is wrong.
No.
And I think we're talking in a few weeks' time to IP lawyer. It'd be really interesting to hear what she has to say about this as well, because
having a nightmare.
It's not
absolute nightmare.
Exactly, they're having an absolute nightmare. It's changing the field overnight. How do you now copyright something that isn't even touched by a human? It's been pulled from maybe millions of humans' input. Should they all get a cut of the copyright or a copy of the royalties? It's very difficult to say.
And this is the problem, like I said, when you remove the human from the interaction or from the creation of something, who is responsible, who is credited, but also who's blamed when things go wrong, I've been listening to stuff about self-driving cars and how that's taking off in the States, and these big ethical questions around.
Huge,
But again, as humans, I come back to this point, we like to see fair treatment. So if your son is killed by a self-driving car,
where does the blame lie?
Who takes responsibility for that? So sorry, we went a bit dark there.
This is the kind of stuff that's on people's minds, though, right? I mean, this is. We can talk all day about the opportunities and the wonderful things that this technology is going to do, but ultimately, unless these big ethical questions are answered, people are always going to be skeptical. So that, we've got to have these conversations. And I think you're right, that we need to involve people across the spectrum. It's not just part of the reason of doing this podcast. Really, is we don't just want to talk to people on the tech side.
No.
It's about talking to those whose lives are going to be impacted by this technology and hearing what they've got to say. Just going back to the music itself, we talked briefly about whether music loses some sort of its soul if it's just AI generated. I wonder, what are your thoughts on that? Would you go and watch a concert that is a symphony by the latest AI model, or do you think if the music is good enough, would you go and see it?
Would I? Yeah, probably. Again, more for the novelty factor, I think.
Right. Okay.
part of the reason people go to classical concerts, and let's not forget, 90% of classical concerts are the traditional music canon. Yes, there is contemporary new music being created, and that's very important, but your average person is going to hear these masterpieces, That's kind of that's what people are going for, partly, is to hear a masterpiece that's kind of known. And so you've already got a problem with new music and contemporary like music, that it hasn't necessarily got the follower base, so AI is kind of added to that, really, because it's a new type of composition. I don't know, maybe it would be composing in an old-fashioned style. I don't know. I think I'm wondering if, for example, though, would it just be faceless AI, or would someone actually go and create a whole persona, like an avatar, essentially? Because that's already come up in things like influencing, hasn't it?
For sure.
So online, you basically have virtual influencers who don't exist, but they serve a really important function. Is it going to be the same? Are you going to have virtual artists? I see that maybe more than virtual composers, but maybe virtual performers or something who don't actually exist. But
it's crazy, isn't it? When you actually start digging into the idea, like you realise, where does this end? Like, when do we stop and say that is enough AI? We just want a bit more kind of human impact. So I suppose taking that idea and running with it, if you've got an AI model that's produced a piece of music, and let's say you go to watch it. Now, I guess there's two ways you could go to watch that. Like you say, you could go to watch it for the novelty value. Like, I'm going to an AI concert. That's cool. I'm going to go and listen to AI music, and we can tell my friends about the fact that it was AI generated. And another world, an alternative universe, where we go to concerts and we don't care. It can be human, it can be AI, it can be a hybrid of the two. Suddenly it doesn't matter. And I think that's less likely, because I think you're absolutely right when you say the human struggle is something we go to see so often, that you go to a concert of new music and the composer comes on stage at the end, because part of it is seeing that's the person who wrote that piece of music. Sure. It's not faceless, is it? It's something about them that you want to hear about.
And it's a way of connecting with that person. I think that's ultimately what we all want as humans, is connection. Even if we're not extroverted people, everyone needs connection, and everyone wants to feel a sense of belonging or a sense of being understood. And that's a huge part of why people engage with art. They want to see something about themselves reflected in that art. And it's a way that they can feel close to the person that created it, and that's timeless. And you can have something that's been created like 1,000 years ago, but you feel a connection with that person who's long dead, because actually, oh my gosh, they were expressing something that I feel too. Or they've opened my eyes to something new that I haven't experienced, but wow, it's really it's deepened my empathy. So I think that's such an integral part of the experience.
I agree.
But I think that's more on the sort of, because there are different ways to engage with art, and there are different types of art as well. You get very sort of deep and serious art. You also get quite high, hijinks, fun, entertaining, and I think that's where you're going to see more of this blurring of it doesn't really matter who wrote it. You already see that on streaming platforms. So you get people. In fact, I was talking to a lady the other day who doesn't know much about music, but she, in the last couple of years, has just started listening to Classic FM all the time. She has it on in the background. She says, I just love it. It's on the background. Even after 5 years of listening to Classic FM, she doesn't know who any composers are. Because it doesn't matter to her.
It's the music
It's
itself.
just the ambience it's creating. It's the fact that it's chilling her out. And so, I couldn't believe that she couldn't even tell me, do you prefer Bartok or Mozart, like the basic kind of
it didn't mean anything.
Nothing. She was just like, no, I just listen to all of it. It's just essentially all this nice background music for me. I really enjoy it.
Calming and
but essentially, in that context, you can completely see how you could just slot AI into that. Every other piece could be AI generated, whether it's a fugue from Baroque style, or whether it's some romantic Debussy-like stuff. Just slot it in, and people aren't necessarily even questioning who wrote this. So, and likewise for people maybe who put YouTube videos on and study to that. I do it when like I said, if I'm working on something and I want to get into a deep thinking zone, I'll put on some random electronic, like trancey type music. I don't care who wrote it. It's being used for the purpose of changing my mood. So I think it's also about what are you engaging with the art for.
Right, okay.
And I think let's not forget, yes, you've got the deep, profound, change my life experience, but you've also got, I just want to chill out, or I just want to feel happy. And I think that is maybe where AI could come in, because AI probably could create some great happy tunes or tunes to help you fall asleep. And but then the question is it then taking work from your kind of composers who would be normally kind of creating all that stock
Yeah, and exactly. And the same, the parallel with the visual art is there as well. And I think stock imagery is something that's obviously a lot more under threat than highbrow, real serious art, because there's more to that package than just the canvas.
Yeah.
It's interesting there that you mention the idea of kind of art being more than just what you see in front of you. That it's an entire journey that you take the audience on, from the composer's journey or the artist's journey. Where I can see AI, being really interesting, and I touched on it there with talking about the hijinks music, as you call it, is the idea that I can say, I liked this track. Yeah. Now, can you generate me something that sounds a lot like it, but isn't this? Yeah. I want to listen to something different every day. Yeah. Because sometimes I find myself, I'm a creature of habit. I put on the same music all the time. I don't particularly explore that much. Yeah. But when I do find something new that I like, I think, why can't I have that new feeling more often? It takes, sometimes weeks, months to find that new track, and then I'll just listen to it until it's completely boring. But do you think that, that personalization where you can say, just generate me on the fly something that matches my immediate mood, this is what I need right now, that could be an option, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we are increasingly an instant gratification kind of society, and it sort of goes along with the kind of consumerist stuff. And I think that's, again, it's very, you can see how that's arguably progress in some ways, but I do also worry when we're kind of leaning towards a world in which we get everything we want immediately when we want it, in exactly the way I want it. I think that is quite sort of at odds with actually reality and what life is. And I don't think I mean, look, maybe I'm crazy, and actually it would be a wonderful heaven-like existence, but part of what makes life meaningful is challenge and is struggle and is the things that go, or part of the things that make life funny, the things that go wrong, and I absolutely, it's part of the human journey is to progress, but I do sort of, I feel like sometimes the soul of being human might just get sucked out a little bit when you're starting to just eradicate any difficulty, any struggle. And I really would rather, to be honest, that AI in the industry, the tech industry, was focusing on solving genuinely awful problems that still exist everywhere, from starvation and climate change, and than me getting a track 10 seconds faster. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And so sometimes I feel like our emphasis is so skewed that we become, in a sense, more and more individualistic, in that sense of, like I said, I want everything now. And meanwhile, there are parts of the planet that are burning. Yeah. And that's what slightly worries me as well. And I think, like the whole Amazon get it, not even next day, get it on the day. It starts to actually feel a bit creepy to me. I mean, occasionally it's like, yeah, great, I needed that. But it's like, I didn't actually need that. I could have gone down to the shop and bought it and used my legs and talked to a human and seen the sun. And I just think it's, we've got to be really careful. What's this tech for? And if it's just being used essentially to make everything faster and faster and make more money and more money, I don't think that's a good route. I think we should be using all of that power, like I said, to solve problems for people who are genuinely suffering.
Yeah, and I wonder where the responsibility for that lies. Does it lie with the developers of these technologies? Does it lie with all of us to kind of make sure that we don't go down that route?
But the worry is that it is the commercial organisations that are adopting this tech. Do you know what I mean? It's not the charities, it's not the homeless centres, it's not the community centre.
It's the for-profit commerce.
It's the people who are selling you crap, who are basically going to sell you more crap. To be very blunt about it. Yeah. So that's my concern, is that actually, is it going to the, yes, of course everyone can use it, but it would be great if you could see that it was being actively deployed in places that really need it. My goodness, how could AI revolutionise something like homelessness?
Exactly.
Or, like real big problems that we see.
And I wonder if, the arts and culture sector should almost be protected as almost like a a safe haven, almost a bastion of us being human. And it's not, it shouldn't be something that we immediately turn to as like another commercial opportunity.
Absolutely.
Or to make a quick buck.
And that's another big thing. I think the reticence from the industry partly comes from, like I said, that there's a lack of resource and lots of creative types go into it and so aren't that interested. But there is also this kind of fierce sense of, we are not commercial. We are not here to make money. We are not here to sell to people in the sense of kind of icky sales. We are here because this is amazing art that we believe in, and that we want to create these cultural experiences where people gather and, you know, feel something. And some people are actually quite actively turned off by anything that is overtly commercial. I think that's a problem, and it happens too much to the point where they shoot themselves in the foot and they reckon, but there's definitely this kind of sense of back off, that's not what we're here for.
Yes, I see. And do you think there's so if we talk about kind of this as a generational thing, I mean, it's always been said that classical music doesn't appeal to young people, which I totally disagree with. I think it has a huge place in the lives of younger people. But then, you also look at things like AI music and you think to yourself, is there a place for this to encourage more people into finding something like a Rachmaninoff symphony? And if you could incorporate the two somehow, I don't know if there's a way that you can, because it is true obviously that there are sometimes barriers in place that stop people even getting to a classical music concert, whether it's price, whether it's communications, whether it's a problem with that marketing. But if there's a way to fuse musical genres together in a way that sort of shows them the path towards something that's a bit more like a Rachmaninoff symphony and a bit less like the thing that's like number one in the charts this week. I don't know, because I think AI has the potential to blend the landscape very well. That's what we've seen from Midjourney, like you mentioned earlier. It's this fusion of ideas is something it's very, very good at. I mean, what do you think about that? Is there a place for kind of fusion?
For sure, and like you already see it. So for years we've had so-called crossover artists. So you've had people like Nigel Kennedy who played the violin, but he dressed like a punk, and he played Vivaldi's Four Seasons, and but everyone was like, wow, he doesn't look like a traditional classical musician. So we've had that. We have Andre Rieu with his Strauss orchestra, which gets millions and millions of followers. So we've had that for a long time, and the industry tends to very much look down on that, which I think is a huge problem. I have to say, I think there is still intense snobbery in the classical music business, which they say there isn't, but there is.
Do you think that's changing over time? Is that slowly going away, or do you think it's ingrained?
I think it's quite embedded.
Really?
I think, it's the flip side of this sense of we are worshipping these masterworks, is that actually the nasty side of that is, and therefore anything that's kind of masquerading as that or whatever is just beneath us and cheapens it. So, but if you look at someone like Max Richter, he's done some really interesting things where he's really blending maybe sort of more electronic stuff, and sort of traditional classical, and then he performs in unusual ways. So he did that whole with his piece Sleep, the whole experiment where he plays basically the thing is played all night in a venue, and people come and they sleep, and they all sleep, and then they wake up and then they listen to a bit and then they sleep again, and that was reported everywhere, and everyone was like, wow, this made me think differently about classical music, if classical music can be like this. So that has been like sort of drawing people in. Film music traditionally and music in gaming has often been a way that you draw in younger crowds. And certainly when we've done concerts of Lord of the Rings music or music for some massive Zelda, Princess Warrior, whatever, people come and they love it, absolutely love it. So it's there have always been ways to get people in. I mean, I would then argue though, however, there is the simplistic assumption, because they've come to a Lord of the Rings concert, they're going to want to come and hear like Stravinsky next week. Maybe not. But again, I think this comes down to there should always be loads of ways to engage with arts and culture. It shouldn't be, you start here and then when you're actually fully enlightened, you end up here. No, because actually that's very that's a very snobby attitude. Everyone is different, everyone likes different things. I actually personally never listen to classical music in my spare time. I listen to Radio 1 the whole time. I love pop music. It's my safe space. For me, classical music, it has too many connotations with work and with the training I did growing up. So actually for me, it's about escapism and fun. I think we've really got to also, maybe get rid of this obsession with taking someone from, you're a beginner and I'm going to take you and you're going to finish by being a super culture vulture. yes, that might happen to some people, and that's great, and we can guide them, and we can use AI maybe to do that in more sophisticated ways. But also, it's completely legit. If you just like Andre Rieu, that's okay.
Dude, that's your thing.
That's your thing. and I that's a big problem the arts and cultural industry have, is that they need to also recognise when it's not the be all and end all to be the uber fan. Sometimes it's okay to just dip in and out and do a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Yeah, you can appeal to that audience.
Yeah, and they are actually just as deserving as an audience as anyone else. They're paying money, they're experiencing it. Why are you a better audience member if you know more than someone else? I think that's just rubbish.
Exactly. You put that beautifully, I think. The idea that, the transition from someone who's just getting started with something like classical music doesn't have to end with listening to really obscure symphonies by people you haven't heard of. But you can stop along that process wherever you want. You can go backwards as well. You can start with a Rachmaninoff symphony and go, okay, this wasn't quite for me, but actually I think I'm gonna love something because I love the spectacle of it. I liked viewing the orchestra. Exactly. I didn't like this particular piece.
Exactly.
And maybe AI has a place to play there in the sense of being able to help people discover what they like and what they don't like. Yeah. I think classical music has always had the issue that it feels as if there's a limited amount to choose between. That you and I know that isn't the case. There's so much out there that people just don't know about. But that maybe there is a place for that sort of that, as long as it's not in a gimmicky way, the kind of the ability to say, look, here's something you haven't tried before. See if you like it. It doesn't have to be something that's kind of off the shelf classical, where people go, now that sounds like classical music, but it's something that's just like flavoured with your style of music. I think that's a fascinating idea. Might help people to actually find new genres that they didn't discover.
Yeah, and I think you do already see it. So for example, like I said, it's already happening. So like Radio 1, which I listen to a lot, they have this kind of late night session that I think, God, who is the presenter there? Maybe it's with Sigrid, who's the singer, the Norwegian singer. But she's often actually incorporating classical pieces in there, often.
Right.
Or it's something that could very easily be thought of as orchestral or chamber music, but then it's got a pop singer over the top. And I can see there, it is it's this blurring of those worlds and that sense of, hey, you think of yourself as a pop person, but actually, did you like this? Well, actually, this is part of the reason you liked it was because it had strings in it. So you might like to listen to some other string stuff. So, so I think if AI can sort of support that process, absolutely, discovery is key.
Yeah, I agree. I want to talk to you as well about something that's close to my heart, which is education. We talked briefly with Derek Hills a few weeks back about how things like ChatGPT are now being seen in the classroom and what that means for essay writing, what it means for learning. In your view, I mean, coming to music specifically, if you've got AI being able to generate music and kids are listening to AI generated music, where do you think that what's the role of education in teaching students what it means to write something like a piece of classical music, or indeed pop music or rap music or whatever it is that they want to write? Do you think it should be used as a tool, almost like just part of the arsenal of things that you have available to you, like electronic keyboards or sampling, or do you think it should be maybe held back from students until we get to a point where the students understand the implications of using AI and the ethical implications of maybe copyrighting someone's work without their knowledge? And also to encourage, in the primary years, certainly, just the fun of it, not to suck the soul out of it, like you mentioned. What do you think the role of AI is in schools, I guess, generally?
I think, look, you're going to start to get into real trouble if children cannot do things for themselves, right? There's no two ways about it. You said that already after a couple of months of basically not writing much yourself, you've already started to feel like that part of your brain's getting lazy, and you're a very intelligent, fully grown man. So can you imagine a world in which we just say, well, you don't really need to learn how to write anymore, because okay, let's do away with handwriting because you don't need that. We'll type, and likewise, although by no means is it normal to be able to read and write music, but I can't imagine a world in which we would not want the children to understand music theory and how to put together pieces of music, because that's the foundation. The foundation is I'm a marketing consultant. I understand marketing. Then I use AI on top.
Precisely.
And then I can assess how well is that AI supporting me. Is the stuff it's throwing back at me legit? Because sometimes it's not. Let's not forget that. The same with anything. I think if you're a talented illustrator, you still have to learn your craft.
Yeah.
You know how to do your stuff. So when it comes to teaching composition or whatever in the classroom, I think it absolutely has to be about so that they can do it themselves. But yeah, of course, not insulating them from the world in which they're going to go into, and explaining, look, there are all these tools. You've had your synthesizers, you've had your samples. This is the next level. But think really carefully about why you're integrating it, what it's adding.
And is this you?
Is this you?
Yeah.
How are you gonna? When you're writing your program notes, how are you gonna credit that? Do you feel like it's more you or more the machine? Or?
Yeah. Do you feel that sense of achievement at the end of it? Right. I mean, that's
maybe actually getting the kids to drill down into, did I, for example, use AI for inspiration? Because that could be something that is sort of more maybe legitimate, but making them be critical basically about think critically about how they're using the AI, because the thing that is scary is the prospect of someone just pressing a button and out something comes and that's my composition. Well, you could do that with anything, an essay or a picture, and it just makes a mockery of education, because the whole point of education is to learn how to do it yourself.
That's what I worry about.
And in a sense, school becomes completely redundant. I mean, this is the bigger worry, I suppose, about AI, is that it could, in a sense, make us quite stupid.
Precisely.
Right? Because we're starting to outsource more and more and more, and not only stupid, but also, like I said, quite lazy, and actually quite vulnerable to attack. Because at that point, it is exactly going through adversity and struggling to learn that makes you tough and makes you resilient and gives you the skills to get through life. If everything is handed to you, if you never have to create anything, if you never have to struggle, if you're never bored, I just can't imagine. You would basically get a very, very kind of squishy sort of blobby human who can't really do anything and doesn't really have an interesting viewpoint on the world.
There's so much to unpack there. I just want to go back on that point that you mentioned earlier around, if children are introduced this too early, it just makes them there's a homogenous blob basically of sort of brain that doesn't really have a unique perspective on anything, because it's drawing from perspectives from the millions of humans that have come before us and written things down, and now ChatGPT has learned from it. I feel we're in a very privileged position actually. I'm 34 and I've known a world without the internet. I remember that time going to the library and going to get books out and reading things and having to give it back after a week, so you had to get it done because otherwise that book wouldn't be there. And you had to memorize that information. Yes, precisely. And now I've got the internet and I know how to use it to my advantage, but also sometimes I love reading a book. I've lived through a world of work where I haven't had ChatGPT and had to write proposals or documents or summaries myself by using my brain. What I worry about is if you blanket say to students, this is from day one, the tool that you now use to do all of this thing, they never develop that muscle of the brain, It feels like a muscle, really, doesn't it? It is, and it is absolutely a muscle. Yeah. Well, I think that, and there's no two ways of saying it, if that was genuinely to happen, I think that would be the start of humanity going backwards. Yeah, I think so. No two ways about it. Yeah. And, for the people who do, believe in more of the existential kind of doom mongering, well, AI is going to take over, will it be a lot easier to if humans have become so lazy and just reliant on outsourcing everything, it'll be a lot easier to manipulate them. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it opens up, mental health is obviously a major crisis at the moment, and I think part of that, like you say, is this immediate gratification and people, feeling like, or seeing influencers that are doing incredible things with their lives. Well, and now those influencers aren't even necessarily real. I mean, how messed up is that people are then getting, it's like suffering from depression because they're comparing themselves to something that's not even real. Yeah. I mean, that's a very dystopian. Exactly, and that's situation. The route that we clearly must avoid at all costs. It reminds me a bit of, I suppose, maybe a silly example, but the rise of gyms. There's so many more gyms than there ever used to be, and people go to the gym more often because they're sat behind a desk all day, and it's a muscle that their muscles just aren't being used, so they find an outlet to do that in their spare time. Whereas back in the day, we would have been farming, we would have been walking. Absolutely. And it was all, jobs kept people fit, like by and large. Totally. Obviously, medicine has come on a long way, so life expectancy's gone up. But ultimately, I think people, physical strength, is now something we have to work on actively. It's not something that comes as a part of the job. And I think you're right that we might find the same mentally.
it's a brilliant analogy, and I think you're absolutely right. I think it will become something that people have to actively work on. Hopefully schools will have an enormous part, schools and universities will have an enormous part to play in that. Because you can conceive of an existence where you have to do very little. Especially if you're moving towards, I don't know, some people have talked about universal basic income coming in, in time. If you don't even have to earn money, then could you just, you wouldn't have much, but could you essentially just live an existence where you're just kind of
by the pool all day and
sitting there and not but at that point, don't forget, you wouldn't have gone to school really, so you would be very it's a really frightening concept, and the idea that we just outsource more and more. And I think I don't know, I think there's a lot to be said for still doing something yourself.
Finding meaning.
And finding meaning in that, because it really comes back to the biggest existential questions of all, is why are we here, you know? And I think everyone agrees that in order to be happy in life, you need a purpose.
Agree.
And in order to kind of fulfill a purpose, you need a set of skills. And if, again, that's being taken away from us, in the sense of, well, you don't have a purpose anymore because you don't have a job, because AI is doing your job. Oh, you don't need to learn those skills anymore because, you can just press a button and out it comes. You are robbing people of a huge human right.
Exactly. And that's what memories are formed of, aren't they? The struggle. You remember the things that were difficult. You don't remember the things that were easy.
Well, that's an interesting thought experiment to think, if someone lived a life of basically just kind of floating along, not much happening, would they even have strong memories,
Probably not, no. And become therefore more influenceable, and
well, and that's the sinister bit, because of course the more malleable people become, the more empty-headed and sort of not thinking critically and not being equipped themselves people become, the easier they are to manipulate. And this is when you get into quite sort of conspiracy theory territory. But there are many people out there who will say it's a very deliberate thing that people are being sort of addicted to their phones. That is actually part of a ploy to essentially make people very malleable, easily to manipulate, which for some big sinister institutions is the perfect thing. You've got a load of drones essentially who
I read that in a book, a recent book I read. I can't remember the title now, but it was talking about the idea that the addiction is part of the strategy, to make us all addicted to our phones or to social media content, or to even the way in which things like series are presented to us now just as a big binge watch. Get addicted to this straight away, have this hit, rather than drip feeding once a week. That's right. Like we remember back in the day.
And I think for those companies, often it is profit driven. It's just how can we just get them to engage more and more and more because we make money from that. But then there are going to be players who take advantage of that, who say, oh, while you're distracted, while you are engrossed in this thing, I'm going to get on and do this or manipulate you or distract you. It used to be, they used to say religion is the opium of the masses, right? This way of kind of placating people. I think technology can arguably, is a little bit of that going on. Technology is the opium of the masses. It's distracting us all. We joked today that I was going to send you my bio and then I put it into an AI and it, for fun, I generated it as a film script instead. And I got completely distracted and I thought, this is hilarious, I'll send you this. And then I forgot to send you the actual bio. So it's very easy, tech can distract you too. We need to keep our critical thinking faculties.
Yeah, definitely. We should end this podcast on an optimistic note, I feel.
We should.
Because I think there is a huge amount to be positive about, but I think like we've rightly talked about, we need to make sure that we are at least having these conversations at the highest levels of government and organisations, that there is an awareness that what we're creating here is potentially very addictive, is potentially something that is going to influence children, and we need to be cautious that we don't make the same, perhaps some would call mistakes that we have done with the likes of social media, where it's become more addictive than we ever thought possible.
Absolutely, and is damaging, the mental health of many people. I think, to be honest, humans are humans, and it will take quite a few catastrophic events for people to really listen and take notice. I think it will take, some awful, thing to happen for people to sit up and listen. So we should expect a few of those. But you are right that, as with any technology, of course it has immense positive potential. I think the key thing for me, and what I think is alarming, is when you hear about companies, basically getting rid of their ethical team, and that's been happening in certain sort of, I believe, certain kind of AI research organisations. That is very alarming because it cannot be progress in spite of everything. It has to be progress and ethics and humanity and what it is to be human and protecting that. As long as we get that right, and I think someone I was listening to put it really well, as long as we can basically put equal effort into the ethics and the guardrails and the parameters as we are putting into actually creating these incredible machines, then you have an amazing outcome, which is how can we use this brilliant new mind to solve some of our biggest problems and make us all happier. But we've got to be honest about what truly makes us happier. It's not just consuming more stuff, it's not just being increasingly individualistic. We might think it is, but actually the things that tend to make people happy a million years ago and now haven't changed. It's community, it's connection, it's love, it's a meaning, it's purpose, it's all these very deep things that generally are not in that stream of let's make money as fast as we can.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So that's where AI, if it can start to support some of those goals, then that's really exciting.
Exactly. When I think about these things, I always go back to the fact that if you think about how we socialised maybe 500, 600 years ago, we'd meet up in a tavern and we'd have a drink together and we'd probably sing songs and talk about stories of things that have happened to us. We do exactly the same today. And that is something that I think is a inedible fact of our existence, is that we have to have that human connection, like you say. So I think for the first time, and we saw it, with things like social media, but for the first time we've got something else is entering our human domain, and we're calling it AI.
And that feels quite human.
Yeah, and it feels very human, and that's the scary thing, is that we need to work out what our relationship with this new thing that's entered the room is going to be. Do we want to treat it as another human, and we go to the pub with it and we tell it stories and we tell it our deepest fears and secrets, or do we want it to keep firmly outside the room as a tool that we see in the same regard as?
And again, you'll get both.
Yeah,
you really will. You'll get both because it already happens. There are already people who use kind of synthetic humans as companionship, because they're so lonely. And who would ever deny them that? And there are other people who will say no. You're absolutely, And again, I think to a degree it has to be personal choice. But from a legislation point of view, it is. I do not envy the people who are trying to keep up with this. No. It is so fast moving. It's incredible.
Well, that's it. I think the speed of it is also something that we've never seen before.
Well, we're creating something that kind of goes much faster than ourselves. And then we're trying to play catch up with it. And I think that's why a lot of people, particularly take it back to arts and culture, they are totally intimidated by that because it's a language they don't, tech is not a language that they speak. And then they hear, how fast it's moving, and then inevitably in the news, it's all about the potential downsides. And of course, the classic, am I going to lose my job? That's what people are most frightened about. You can see how there's also a little bit of, I don't want to hear about it, a bit of switching off.
So Fab, I wanted to also ask you, how should people in the arts and culture sector upskill and learn about this technology in a way that it makes it very easy to get started and to make them feel like they're now not out of the loop, but they're in the loop, they're in the conversation, they can start actually directing how this field goes. Are there any platforms or tools that you've seen out there that have been really useful? So
I think this is crucial. I think rather than it just becoming another sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of, we're the arts, we're just 20 years behind everyone else in terms of tech. No, let's actually take the opportunity to learn and educate ourselves, and let's recognise you don't have to know everything. It's just better to dip your toe in and to start experimenting. So the most obvious thing anyone can do is start experimenting with some of these free tools. Do it for fun, do it, just have a go on one of these large language models. Have a go with one of these text-to-image generators and see what comes out. Once you've used something, it's a lot less scary, right?
So we're talking about ChatGPT. That's free, I think, to sign up to.
Or like I use Microsoft's Bing Chat is very, very good. I've been using Facetune, for example, to create some cool sort of like Fabienne in the style of Andy Warhol or whatever. So people can, and there are lots of great now websites that are pulling together loads of links, so you can just go and test these tools out. Most of them are just apps on your phone. I would really encourage people to actually, this is a suggestion that was from a much bigger company in a different sector, but I think it can apply to the arts and culture, which is to basically like create a little AI working group in your organisation.
That's a great idea.
So so that there's actually a formal space, once a month, or probably need it once every day. But yeah, once a month you would sit and you would discuss, okay, what have we all learned about what's gone on in AI, and crucially, how is that relevant to our sector and what we do? And has anyone got great examples that they've been playing with that they think could impact business processes or indeed the creative process, and just start to really own it, and take some ownership. I actually liken it a little bit to the climate emergency and global warming. 20 years ago, no one really spoke about that in organisations, and now it's pretty uncommon to have an organisation that doesn't talk about or think about sustainability at all. It's something that a lot of organisations have a working group. They've committed to certain processes. They've committed to kind of educating themselves to a degree, and then allowing that to feed into their processes. I think in my view, AI and climate change are going to be the big issues of our century and beyond. And I think every then company which exists in that world has to be au fait with these topics. You don't have a choice. You cannot ignore it. It will just swallow you up otherwise. So just in the same way that you might have a sustainability steering group, create a little AI steering group. And give yourself some really simple aims to start off if you want. Very easy, just go and test out the tools. I think that's key. And for maybe someone in the organisation who's naturally a bit more inclined, and it doesn't matter what rank they are or age, let them take the lead. And I think that's a good way to develop people too. One thing that I haven't really seen, although I haven't done an extensive survey, I haven't really seen what I would call the umbrella bodies, the associations, step up and take a lead here. So I was looking at, the Arts Marketing Association website, or the Association of British Orchestras, and there's loads of these organisations, but I really think they have a big responsibility to actually start the conversation about AI as well.
For sure.
You might start seeing it in more people's conferences soon, I hope you will. But if you compare that with the CIM, the Chartered Institute of Marketing website, you go on and immediately there's courses about AI. It's there. So I think the umbrella bodies need to do a good job as well. I think basically don't be afraid. Don't shy away from it at all, but also don't just see it as a gimmick. Because I think at this point, anyone who has heard of it in the sector tends to think of it more in terms of that performative, gimmicky side, and they're not recognising the potential effect in terms of business processes.
I love the idea of a small working group, because I think the fear is that you've got to suddenly invest loads of money into this, or it's going to cost loads. I mean, these tools are mostly free. If you want to just start using stuff and you want to maybe do a quick A/B test between a team that's using it and a team that isn't using it, or a few people in your team that are and aren't, that's the sort of stuff you can do right here, start tomorrow. There's no barrier to it.
That's it, because you say AI and people immediately go, oh my god, all this infrastructure, I don't want to be another new platform, I don't want to be trained on it, But you're right, it doesn't have to be that. I think it is important though, when you are starting to talk about AI in your organisation, that has really got to be in parallel with reassurance, because it doesn't, you can see why, especially maybe younger staff might start to panic if we're looking at tools that automate press clippings and automate, social media posts and automate booking flights for artists. You can see how those people would start to worry and go, oh my goodness, I'm not going to be needed soon. So I think it's really critical that, again, everybody at every level is involved in the conversation. And it is presented fundamentally as this is a new tool. This is not here to replace anybody. And if anybody's job is so, in a sense, mundane that it can all be automated, we'll find something else for you to do.
Exactly.
We will actually use that as an opportunity to elevate your learning and develop you. We're not just going to axe you.
And higher level thinking and higher level
Exactly
skills.
That. So I think that conversation must be had. Otherwise, you can see how people are going to start to get very, very worried. And look, this is the arts where people don't earn much money anyway. So they tend to be people who love the art form. And they really care about the work. So I would hate to think that people would feel like if I start to explore this, I'm almost giving credence to, I'm almost saying, yes, make me redundant. People have joked to me, they've said, aren't you worried as a marketing consultant? Because I've done stuff like, I've said, create me a whole strategy for this, and actually then compared it to the strategy I'd written a couple of months ago just for fun. But then people say to me, but aren't you worried, that it's now they're not going to need to pay you? And I always say, well, no, because,
it's a tool.
Part of the reason people like to work with me as well is not just because I come up with good strategies, it's because of me. It's because of my personality. But to go back to what we were saying, if I was brought up in a world where I never had to use my brain, would I have this personality? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly, it all comes back to that, doesn't it? Early days education, can we instill the right qualities in students to make them thrive in the workplace. And I guess, like, you mentioned there, the whole, jobs being taken. I think that you're right. It's right to mention that. It's a major worry, I think, from a lot of people, is that they see themselves being replaced. However, I suppose it feels very similar to me to the early days of the internet, where people had exactly the same fears about, am I going to be replaced because now the internet is here, and this was the big scary thing that could replace my job, or at least make my job so easy that I wouldn't be needed. And I think there's no, we can't dress it up. There will be some jobs that ultimately will go because of this technology. However, I don't think it's at the scale that a lot of people are touting, or at least if it is, then you're right that there's other jobs that will become and open up as a result of it. And I think that's a huge opportunity and something we should be pleased about, because the thing is automating largely the admin and
absolutely.
the stuff. You don't want to be sitting there every sentence thinking about how you should write it.
And look, and no one ever has enough time in the day, and especially in arts and cultural organisations, they're often it's the biggest complaint I hear is we just don't have enough time, and we don't have enough resource. So actually, in a way, AI is the perfect tool, because it can really, don't need to do your data cleaning, you don't need to do your writing up your emails, or your social media posts and scheduling them all. You can outsource that, and then free you up to really get to know your audience members properly, to see them more in real life, to all sorts of things.
I think that's a great way of putting it. Like speaking with Derek as well last week, he said he'd love teachers to have more time to stand at the school gate and
that's right.
Pull the people coming in through their gates, welcome them and say, actually talk to them, have a chat, rather than being in the staff room preparing
having
for that
to
lesson.
do the paperwork.
Exactly.
And
maybe you'll see the same thing in arts and culture then.
I think to a degree,
for sure. Okay, cool. So to finish up, Fab, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you today. We've covered so much ground. This conversation has been far wider reaching than I ever thought we could have. We talked about education, we talked about the impact of AI just generally on society. So my final question to you, I guess, would be about what you see the future looking like. Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? What would you like to see? What do you think is possible?
Future. I'll talk, again, obviously through my arts and culture lens. I really hope that the industry can get on board, and especially because the tools are
easier
to use now than ever. I think before there was maybe this sense that it was a bit hard to know how to use it, but look, now it is, chatbots and whatever are as non-technical as they come. So I would really hope the industry can see the benefits there, and it can get on board, and it can start to create little working groups within organisations, that it can start to think, what are the most kind of mundane, time-sucking parts of my job that are really not adding anything to me personally, or but need to be done. Outsource those, and develop their staff to bigger and greater things. I'd be interested to see how AI is integrated in terms of the creative product. I think it must be, in a sense, because that's part of the exploration. But I think it needs to be really transparent. It needs to be very honest about what is AI and what is human and what's hybrid, and involve the audiences and the participants in what that means, and all create meaning together. I think there will be some really big mistakes along the way. I think there'll be some howlers, some really awful examples of AI being used wrongly, but that's part of experimentation. But my dream for AI, I guess, like I said, is that we have enough of those safety mechanisms, and we've thought about the ethical side, and we've got lots of power going into that, and about preserving our humanity and celebrating that, so that the development of it is profound but also secure, that we don't just go rattling off into this kind of slightly terrifying Wild West. And that makes for a more creative, more interesting, more democratic landscape for arts and cultural organisations and the people that engage with them. I think the future has to be bright. We have to think of it in that way.
It always has been.
We can't go forward fearing the worst. But I'd really love to see AI being really deployed, like I said, to help people who need it the most, who are suffering the most in the world. That's what I would love to see. But I do think everybody needs to get involved, and it's okay now in May 2023 to still not know what ChatGPT is, but
it's not too late to start.
you need to get on board. You need to know a little bit about these things, even if it freaks you out. In fact, especially if it freaks you out, because can't hide from it. So
expand your horizons. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really, really exciting.
Brilliant. Well, Fab, it's been fascinating having you on. I'm so glad to have had this conversation with you. So thanks very much, and best of luck with all your future endeavours as a consultant. I'm sure I'll be certainly looking out for all of the amazing stuff that you're
next time I come on, I'm going to come on in hologram form. And I'll just let the AI see if they make the same jokes as me. Probably won't.
Fab bot. Cool. All right. Well, pleasure having you on, and thanks again.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks.